Get on. But we're going to go ahead and introduce ourselves. So my name is Kabe Boyson. I am currently serving as your Southeast State Vice President. I'm from the Wapello FFA chapter. I'm currently a sophomore at Iowa State University.
Do you want to say like district office too?
Yeah, and I was also the district treasurer in 2018-2019.
My name is Mia Gibson. I'm currently serving as the state secretary. I come from the North Fayette Valley FFA chapter, which is in the Northeast District, and I'm currently a freshman at DMAC studying ag business. And the 2 years before this, I served as a district officer within the Northeast District.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Devin, and I'm currently serving as a South Central State Vice President. For the past 2 years, I served as a district officer in the South Central District as well, and I'm currently a freshman at Iowa State majoring in agriculture and society.
But before we dive right in, we're just gonna give like a basic interview about what like district office is, what state office is, just the process of everything. We'll go through quite a bit of stuff, and then at the end we'll leave time for questions. So I think Devin is gonna start us off.
Yeah, so it sounds like for the most part, we are all eligible to be running for district office in the next year or two. But I know that a couple of you are also eligible to run for state office, and down the road, I'm sure all of you might consider that as an option too. So for those of you that don't know what each of these two positions require, or some of the different things that they do throughout the year, that's what we're going to try to describe in this slide. And if I miss anything, Kabe and Mia, be sure to chime in as well. But some of the main duties as a district officer include running district events from CDEs to district convention. Throughout your district officer year, you will also go on chapter visits within your home district. You'll get to experience a leadership conference exclusively for district officers, both in the spring and in the fall. Like I said, you put in a lot of work for district convention as far as preparing for that actual setup and then execution the day of. That's usually kind of the capstone of your year. Obviously, that's where you begin and end your year. So that's definitely a big part of the year. Is there anything you guys want to add on for district office?
I guess the one thing I just want to say, it's like every district does it a little different. So like I know all three of us, our district officer years was all a little different. So like it's hard to say exactly one thing because it just depends on district culture and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I know my district, we usually have a pretty good attendance in like district convention and competitions and stuff. So that's pretty fun, especially going throughout your year. You'll have just lots of different chapter visits and getting involved with the different chapters. So, and I know there's good interaction with that between all the districts. So it's honestly a very, very good experience.
Yeah, and so in the South Central District, a couple of our kind of exclusive things is the South Central CDE Day. It's a big day, usually in August or September, where if you haven't been there before, all the chapters from not only the South Central District, but a lot of other districts as well, come together and do different CDEs. So that's a big day for our district officers. And then the 8-to-8 lock-in, something that my team started a couple years ago. And hopefully that gets to carry on as a tradition in the South Central District. But another part that district officers play a huge role in. I guess something that's important to worth note under district office is that it is a little bit more time demanding of yourself through your high school years. So it's important that if elected, you not only prioritize FFA and district office events, but school also has to come first, and you have to remain in good standings with your school to be able to be eligible as a district officer. So staying on top of your grades and being a responsible student comes far before anything you will do for district office. But and that goes a lot with the district culture too, as far as how many days you'll be gone from school. I know when I was a district officer, I missed several days of school for leadership conferences, traveling to other districts for chapter officer leadership training and Green Hand Fire Up, as well as chapter visits in the district. So you will typically miss a lot of school as well. So that has to be something that you are comfortable and able to do. One last thing on district office is you will also get the opportunity to travel a lot in other districts. And so that allows opportunity to meet new people, make new friends and connections. And like I said, get to travel a lot across the entire state of Iowa, not just your own district. So um, when I get done with the district and state office, both, I'll let you guys ask any more questions about something I might have missed. But um, we'll go ahead and roll on to state office next. So the state officer year is obviously comprised of a lot more working pieces than the district officer is going to be exposed to. Because as a state officer, not only are you involved in all of those district events that I just named, but you have a whole list of other events that you also are responsible in being a part of. So to kick off your state officer year, you'll be elected in April, and then that following summer, you will pretty much be busy every week with chapter officer leadership trainings in your own district as well as others, and then as well as leadership training as a state officer that you will go through. We do a lot of in-house training at the Enrichment Center that usually takes up a Monday through Friday type time frame, several weeks throughout the summer. Typical state officer year, you also travel to Washington, D.C. in July for State Officer Summit, where you'll meet with other state officers and get some more leadership training there. And then in the fall, you'll obviously go to National Convention. And then in the fall, you'll also be busy with Green Hand Fire Ups, your own, as well as other districts, on top of some other leadership trainings that the state staff is going to provide for you. I'm just trying to go over a brief timeline of things here. And then in the winter, like this week is set aside for winter work week. So over winter break, we all come together for a week to start prepping for state convention. After this, we're going to be pretty busy with chapter visits from now until FFA week. And then during FFA week, you'll pretty much do chapter visits the whole week. That's usually February. And then from now until state convention, we're going to be preparing, and practicing for state convention. So not to mention, all the little things here and there, stakeholder engagements. There's a lot of alumni engagements that happened here and there. I missed state fair. That's a big one in August. You'll be at the state fair the whole time, staying very busy there. So that's kind of a brief overview of what the district and state officer year might look like. I know that was a lot, and I know I missed a lot. So if you have any questions about specific roles or duties as a district and state officer, this would be a good time to ask those.
A couple things just to touch off what Devin said there. The opportunities that you'll have, like legislative symposium, things like that, just getting out there and getting those opportunities. And not only just with state office, you also have opportunities like that with district office and other events. These are like, I know state office definitely is like a full-time job. And district office is just as busy. And not to scare anyone, I'm just kind of giving you guys a little insight on some of that. So definitely a lot of work, a lot more than I thought it was going to be, but
it's also very rewarding.
Yeah, very well worth your time.
Yeah. I guess, does anyone have any other questions? Otherwise, we'll move on.
And we could always ask them at the end too.
Yeah, questions at the end too. I guess we'll move on to the next thing. So the next thing we're just going to talk about.
Yeah, Trenton unmuted. Did you have a question, Trenton?
I did. I was going to ask what the interview process was like for a state office.
Yep, that's coming up.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. So like I was saying, we're going to go.
One second here. I think. Just kidding.
I'll reshare it. We're having some technical difficulties. Okay, so I'm just gonna like walk through the website, and just for you guys to be aware, we are updating our website. So in the next, it's getting worked on. So I'm gonna say in the next month or two, there'll be a new website with a different design, but all the same components are there. So for district office, if you go under district, and then any like whichever district you're in. So I'm just gonna go to the top, the North Central. So like there's all the information right on the side. So you have your constitution, your officer application, which the new one is not out yet, but that'll be coming in the next week or two. Nominating committee applications, and then it goes over the officer selection process, which we'll go over later too. And then there's all the resources there right there. And then for state office, so under officers, and then you go under the state officer selection process, there is a lot more here. Just like there is a workshop that is getting held January 9th this year with IAT, all about state officer candidate or the state officer selection process. So that's a very beneficial to go to, and they'll go through a lot more than what we're going through tonight, but this is just where you can find all the information. Next, we are going into applications. So I guess we'll just start with the district application.
There we go. Okay. Oh, crap.
I think I have to stop sharing and then share that screen.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and just kind of go through the application here a little bit. We'll first go through the district officer application, and then we'll go through the state officer application. And like Mia said, these will, the new updated one is not currently on the website, but I think they should be out by the 14th.
Yeah, and just so everyone knows, the district officer application, our team worked to revise, so it's quite a bit different than last year's.
I don't know if it's a 4. I'm not sure exactly when it should be out, but it should be shortly. So just keep on a lookout for that. It does say that they are, they need to be submitted by January 15th. So that's kind of something just to kind of keep in your mind. As we kind of go through this, these are some things just to kind of read as you open that application. Obviously the generic stuff, your name, your chapter, school name, address, things like that. Your office desired of choice. There's many different offices that you can choose. Each district kind of varies, so maybe get a hold of someone if you don't know what those are. I know my district, we have 3 VPs and then treasurer, secretary, and reporter. So like I said, each of those districts kind of vary. So
and you can find like officer positions on your district page. They'll show all the officer positions. So if you have any questions about that, they'll be there too.
Yeah, definitely. And then kind of just going on down the sheet here, you'll go ahead and initial these after you read them. And then once you get this, you'll kind of talk about your SAE, describe that a little bit, just so the nominating committee, when they do review these, will have kind of an idea of you, your background, your SAE. Kind of going down onto the next sheet, we have here the offices held in FFA. I think those are pretty self-explanatory. Yep. Your local leadership activities above the chapter leadership activities, and then the FFA awards. These aren't degrees. These are just awards that you've earned. So that kind of gets a little confusing. I know when I filled the application out, I was kind of got a little confused on that. And then going on down the line, the school and community leadership, that would not be included in your FFA leadership. On to the next page. This is kind of your top 5 qualifications for district office. That's kind of like the qualifications that you're going to bring to district office, that your personal self is going to bring to that. Answering the questions below, you're going to describe a situation when you have been a reliable member of a team and your role model on that team, and your role on that team, excuse me. and then you're going to kind of explain why you desire to be a district officer. So pretty simple questions. Just answer those in 150 words or less. Like I said, you don't want to get too wordy when you're for the non-com. And then what you'll do is you'll go ahead and put your advisor's email on there. A form will be sent to your advisor to have her fill it out to kind of, it's just like an evaluation form, not really too big of a deal, but they will need to do that. That's kind of something that's changed since the last application if you've already looked at that.
And also just to make sure your advisor is aware, like, hey, like I sent, I'm sure you'll communicate with them, but just so they know that, yeah, there'll be a form, evaluation form that'll be sent in their email just to make sure they fill it out and get it sent back as soon as possible.
Yeah, definitely. And then the next few pages that we're going to look over, or we're not going to explain all of it, but these are things that you should definitely look over pretty deeply. I know I definitely looked over them pretty deeply, and it's just the things to kind of make sure that you are holding up to what you say you do when applying for district office. Just kind of read through those when the applications come out, and then we'll just have you sign there at the bottom and date that. And then here, I believe this is the last page. I could be wrong, but this is the parent and guardian. Just have someone sign that, and then your advisor will also sign this. So she'll know that you're getting that sent in. And then you'll have one school administrator sign this too as well. So for me, I think I had my principal sign it, or you can do like your superintendent, something like that. And then that's just kind of the rest of that. That was not the last page, but
this is when they're signing up on the top page here, just to make sure they read through this, because this is the policy form. So they're signing off on that when you read this policy form, that if something like that happens, like these are the consequences basically. So just to make sure the people that your parents, they know, fully aware, they've seen the application, they know the policy form, same with your advisor, your administration, just so everyone's on the same page.
So I see that we have a question here. It says, when is the nomination committee form out for this year? I believe
it's right when district officer applications, state officer applications come out, the nominating committee form will come out too.
Yep. And just to kind of clarify, just so you guys know that nomination committee member cannot be from your same chapter. So that's just kind of just to clarify for you guys. Just and then that's kind of
all for district, I would say.
Yep, that'd be all for district. And like I said, we can always go back to that at the end when we got some questions. I'll stop the share here and go to the state officer one.
So while he's doing that, so the nominating committee are the people that are interviewing you. So within your district, I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe there's 12 people or is it 8? I think it's 12 for state office and 8 for district office. So those are just the people that are in the room or interviewing you. So if you would like to be one of those people that pick out the ballot for district officers or state officers, then that is basically what the nominating committee is. So they work really hard. So the question was, would you recommend typing this application? And I would say yes. I guess I have typed all the applications that I have sent in. So it can be a little tricky with the formatting and stuff, but just playing around to make sure your application looks the best as possible. I know the website
Every
that
time I click on that.
I know that the website that I use, I'm not sure what everyone else used, but I use Doc Hub. Is a pretty good website to fill out applications on. Maybe I'll pull it up. So we're trying to pull up the state officer application. We're having a little bit of troubles.
I'll stop sharing and try and let your computer do that. I don't know why. Okay, so as you can see, Mia got that pulled up. So the state officer application is a little different than the district officer application. Obviously, all this first stuff is pretty similar and then you're going to still kind of initial or put a check mark in those boxes to say that you will do each of those things. Just like the district officer application, you still have your SAE area. You just put a little description in there. Your FFA activities, offices held, your local leadership, above the local leadership. All this is kind of the same as district office, so we won't explain too much of that. The question here is a little different. It's how has your passion for the FFA evolved through your FFA journey? So you'll have about 200 words for that. That's pretty nice to have a little more room there to explain yourself.
Before we go farther, we got the question of what would an example of above the chapter level activity be? So I would, so like office held is obviously your offices, local FFA activity. So that's like, I know my chapter does like a turkey feed, or if you do like adopt a highway, pick up ditches, that's like what that would be. So above the chapter level could be like any conferences you have gone to.
So I know, for example, like one thing that I used was the AFA conference, and then I just put that in there, and then that's like a national conference. So I put the AFA conference, and then I put the year that I went, which would have been last year. So that's like something that's outside of FFA that you kind of have done, I guess.
Is there anything you want to add to that, Devin?
No, I would just say if you're not sure about what above the level FFA, what counts as an above the local level activity, ask your advisor. But basically, if your local chapter does not sponsor or put on the event, then it's most likely going to be considered above the local level.
Yep.
And then the next question would be like contests, so CDs and LDs. So that's like your FFA awards, I would classify them as. So like if you competed at your chapter level or your district level, so you can say like which one. So if you like competed conduct and you got a silver at goal or a silver at districts, I would say that goes there.
Yeah, and then like also another thing besides like just contests, I know like I was a star finalist for the chapter or the farmer deal, and that's something like you can put in there also.
Yeah, this is always like a questioning of like what goes where. Just like try to like think about all your activities you've done, pick out your ones that you feel like you've showed the most leadership in or that were the most important, and then just try to like group them into the same categories and then put them on the application.
One kind of tip that I like to do when I was filling out my applications is I just had like a Word doc open, and then I just said freshman year of high school, or if you started in junior high, freshman, sophomore, and then just go back and think about the things that you did, type out those. And then that kind of gives you an idea of things that you could put in there and kind of weigh your options as to what you think would be best in the application.
So then like this is basically very similar. It's just more agreement. So to read through this very carefully, these are like tentative dates. I guess this is last year's application. Like, hey, this is happening. You'll probably be needed, just so you know like what's coming up.
Yeah, it kind of gives you just a rough schedule as to what you're doing, and that shows kind of how much stuff that you'll be doing throughout the year. So that's also very nice to look at.
And then just some more policy agreements, just to make sure you guys read through this very clearly and try to understand it, and just know like this is all expected of a state officer, I guess. That's basically what the rest of the application entails, just different policy agreements.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll go ahead and share my screen again. Just kidding. You want to pull that up, Mia?
Yeah, I'll be able to.
Just kidding. I think I got it.
Okay. So then after applications, so we're going to talk about just like preparing. So once you put in your application, obviously your next step is going to be your interviews. So on the association website, there are interview questions available.
Are we going to the
District.
Oh, never mind.
Can you click on that?
We haven't pulled up.
It doesn't share.
This just does not want to work for us today.
So like this is just sample interview questions. When state officers, if you go to the state officer candidate workshop, you get a whole binder and there's a lot more within it, but we're probably just going to basically talk about district interviews. So just like here are some sample questions that they could ask. This doesn't mean that these are the questions that they're going to ask, but just to start thinking about different ways that you might answer them, I guess. Also with preparing, I guess what I did, this is different for every person, but I never like to come up with like a complete answer. Like if they ask me this, like this is exactly how I'm going to say, because I knew that if I was going to get in the interview room and I had that, I would like mess up and then I'd stumble even more. So the way that I always went about interviews was just thinking of different like meaningful events that had happened in my life, different contests, different teams I've worked in, and just pulling that in with any question.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of going off that, like she said, the state office one, we showed you how to get to that state officer selection process. There's a lot of resources in there too, that you could use. And like that state officer candidate workshop, I highly encourage, if you're thinking about running for state office, to people that are go to that. It's super helpful, and it'll kind of get to know some more things about the different rounds that we'll talk about later.
Yeah, and then the next thing that we had on the list was just ask for help. So if this is your advisor, if this is someone within your school, a past district officer, past state officer, everyone's willing to help. So just reach out and ask for help if you have questions, or like, hey, like, could you ask a few questions to me and just give me some feedback about how I'm answering them. And then lastly, I would just say gain a basic knowledge of FFA, of agriculture. Within, I know both district and state office, they have a test. The district is obviously a lot easier than the state officer test, but it's just basic knowledge of FFA, so gaining basic knowledge. Is there anything you want to add, Devin, to that for preparing?
No, I think you hit it on it pretty well. The biggest thing that I always prepared for and prepared a lot for was using the sample questions that you guys touched on that are on the website.
So just like knowing like, oh, if they're going to ask me this question, I'll talk about this. This might be how I go talk about it, and make sure like your point comes across.
Yeah. Another thing I did is practice interviews. Sit down with other people you go to school with your advisor, maybe other teachers, and give them those sample questions and have them ask you, 5 or 6 of those, and eventually work up to where, you've got to keep it in the time frame and stuff like that. And that will help you be prepared a lot for the interviews. And I know it definitely helped calm my nerves the first time that I was interviewing as well.
Kind of going off of that, when you talk about gaining basic knowledge, you're gaining knowledge about the FFA and yourself in general. Just kind of think of some stories that you've done, some different, not even just in FFA, talk about things outside of FFA. And like Devin said, if you talk to your advisor, friends at school, have them interview you. If you can interview in front of them, you'll definitely be able to do it in front of non-com, because interviewing in front of people is probably about the worst thing that you could do, but it's the best for you. It's just super awkward, but it's definitely super helpful when it comes that time.
Like Kabe touched on, just take time to reflect on yourself. I know that I've done this every time that I've interviewed. Just like think about what's really impacted you and changed you to the person you are today, and come on that. So the next thing we're actually going to talk about is the interview process. So we will jump into that. I'm going to pull up that district.
Yep.
So on the website, this is on the state officer or district officer selection process or state officer selection process.
No, this is I don't know why it keeps pulling that same one up. Yeah, because it keeps pulling up the application.
Sorry for these technical difficulties. So like I mentioned, this is on the district page. Like if you go within your district, I believe this is like called the selection process. So I just pulled out the couple pages that they talk about interview rounds. So your application obviously gets looked at. It's part of your score. So then round one. So for district office, I believe, yep, you have, it's one, so it's a 1-on-7. So you'll have 7 nominating committee members that are asking you questions. And there are 5 questions that they'll ask you, and you have up to 8 minutes to answer them. So that's the first thing you'll go through. There's also a multiple choice test that you will be doing within that time, like before you give your interview, after you give your interview. You have 30 minutes to complete it. It's just basic knowledge of FFA, whose offices, what's the motto, what's the mission statement, creed, stuff like that. And then the last part of it is you have a 2-on-1. So basically this is the nominating committee splits up into 8 different groups. So it's 2 people, 2 people, 2 people, and it's just a rotation. And you have 2 minutes with the 2 nominating committee members, and they'll ask you 1 to 2 questions. So this is more of like a personal based interview. And just be prepared for any of the questions, I guess, to talk about anything. I guess that's just the short end of basic of the interview. There's obviously more explanation within this. And once you apply, there'll be more information sent out, like how logistics work and everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So then Kabe, the state officer interviews process is a lot more in depth. And like we've mentioned multiple times, the SOC workshop goes through this in depth. It's a whole day of learning about it. So I'm just going to do a real brief about it. And then obviously if there's questions, we can answer those. So round 1, so this is like the same as district officer. There's a personal round interview. There are 3 to 5 questions up to 6 minutes. So there's 12 people on the nominating committee. And then there's a multiple choice test. Round robins are, so you have like a conversation piece that they give to you, and then you basically talk to an industry professional about some topic up to 2 minutes, and then the nominating committee is watching that. And then just like district officers, you have one-on-ones this time. So this is when you have a conversation with each individual nominating committee. They'll ask you a couple of questions. It's very personal. This is the time that they can really see who you are, so to show yourself in the best way possible. There's also a written exam. So within state office process of interviewing, there's 3 hot topics, and those are different each year. So it'll be about one of the hot topics, and you just basically write up.
The hot topics will not be announced until the application comes out.
Yep. So that'll be within
the workbook.
Yeah.
Like if you go to the state officer candidate workshop, sometimes they have it there, sometimes they don't. But it will definitely be on the website in the workbook when that is uploaded.
Yep. And then the second to last is an advocacy stand and deliver. So you'll get like a prompt. It'll be about one of the hot topics. You'll have 20 minutes to prepare a speech, and then you have like 3-minute speech you're supposed to give. And then the people that, this isn't nominating committee that is watching you. It'll be like industry professionals and people like that. And they'll be able to ask you 2 to 3 questions about your speech. And then the last thing is another personal round. So this is 3 to 5 questions. You have 8 minutes, and it's just basically the last part of your interview to round everything off, leave anything out there that you won't want to say. So I know that was a lot of information, and there's a lot more out there about that, but that's just the basic information about interview rounds. So if anyone has any questions, otherwise we will move on to the next portion.
Yeah, so if there's no questions, we'll move on to speeches. So the biggest thing about speeches is for district office, you do not need to prepare a speech for the night of interviews. If you make ballot, which you'll find out after interviews, then you need to make a speech to give at convention. The same is true for district and state office. The difference between district and state office, however, is district office, you will have several weeks in between interviews and district convention to prepare that speech. So you don't need to worry about your speech until after interviews if you make a ballot, and then you can prepare for district convention. Whereas for state office, you will give your speech. You will not know if you make a ballot until state convention, and you'll have to give your speech a couple minutes later. So you do need to have your speech prepared by state convention, which is only a couple of days after interviews. So note that difference there. Preparation. What should I write my speech about? So there's no right or wrong answer as to what you should write your speech about. The biggest piece of advice I can give you here is to go watch some past state officers' speeches. They are on YouTube. All you have to Google is state office, FFA, state office business session, and you can watch speeches there. Typically, they choose kind of like a motivational topic or something of that nature. A topic, excuse me, a topic that's going to resonate with the members or stick with them, something they'll remember, and something that really speaks about who you are as a person and gives them a glimpse into your personality. Do you guys have any, Mia and Kabe, any advice on speech topics? I know that's kind of a gray area.
It's a very gray area. You can go anything, whichever way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
You can go like with a personal story, or you can go about something that you've learned over the years. It's very up to you and however way you want to deliver. Like Devin said, I think it's very, I know my first year, I like watched a whole bunch of different speeches and just to know like what fits. And definitely I'd say your district officer speech is a little bit less than your state officer speech.
Yep.
So like if you're a district looking to run for district officer and you make it on the ballot and you go watch some state officer speeches, I definitely know mine was not at that level, just to not be overwhelmed too much by it.
yeah, kind of going off of that, like I picked a topic that I was passionate about, that like meant to like a lot to me. So then I knew more like about my speech, so I could give it like, you know what I mean? It's kind of like you're more passionate about it, so you're going to be able to speak it better. That's just kind of one advice that I'll give you. Other than that, it's hard. Speeches are
Definitely to talk to your advisor, or if you have a speech. I know like I talked to my person in my school that taught speech just to like, hey, like what is normal, like what, just talk to other people with and get help on your speech. I definitely did that.
Yeah, that's a really big thing, is getting help on speeches. The speech should definitely not be a independent or personal part of the preparation process. You should seek out for help about writing your speech as well as practicing to deliver. So, you know, when you're preparing for your speech for convention, obviously you want to show up to convention with that memorized. So you prepare ahead of time so that you have that memorized. Practice giving it on a stage, you know, at school or something like that. The next thing on speeches is you will give your speech in front of a lot of people. It's going to be in front of more than just the nom-com that you originally interviewed with. You'll give your speech in front of the delegates. So every chapter gets to have 2 delegates. So in your district, say you have 40 chapters, that means you'll be giving your speech to about 80 people. So that's just something to know ahead of time, not something to be scared of, but just so you're prepared for that. And showing up that day, what to expect. And the last thing on speeches is after you give your speech, you will be asked 2 questions on stage that you'll have to answer in front of the delegates. And I think you have a minute to answer each question. Those questions typically are pulled from the sample interview questions, unless they decide to come up with one on their own. So
And one thing
that's just another important thing to know. Go ahead, Mia.
I guess Northeast and South Central district culture is a lot different. So I know that it just depends. Like I know within Northeast, like if you're one of the 4 vice presidents, you're only giving it in front of like 20 people. Well, if you're like within South Central, it's like all of your, so it's just depending on your district and stuff like that.
Yeah. The last thing I guess I would say about speeches I forgot to mention is that they are 2 minutes long, and you will be cut off at 2 minutes. And then questions, you'll have a minute each for each question.
Yep. And I'd just say, like, I know that I practice in front of like different classes within my my FFA chapter, and just try to practice as much as possible so that I know the nerves are a lot. So when you're in front of those people, just to try to not have that as much nerves so you don't blank within giving your speech.
Yeah. Are there any questions about speeches?
So I know before, Trenton asked when state officer applications are due. So those are due February 12th this year. And then Holly will answer your question at the end when we get to that point.
Okay. So this is, we're getting pretty close here to the end of, before we get to questions, winning versus losing. This is definitely something that you need to take into consideration when running for these offices, because I know when you run for district office or run for state office, everyone's going for that same position that you're going for. And whether you win or you lose, we're all running for the same reason. And that reason is most of the time to impact members of the Iowa FFA. I know for me, I've kind of been on both sides of these. I know I've been on the winning side, but at the same time, I've been on the losing side. I know last year I ran for state office. I did not, I was balloted and did not make the team. However, that was something that I thought back on after I didn't make the team that year. I thought back on, well, why was I running? Well, I was running because I wanted to help the Iowa FFA or impact members. So what I did is after I lost, I still offered to help volunteer at these different events, help like at Colt, at GFU, I still went back facilitated. So you can still give back to the organization, whether you make the team or you don't. And like I said, either way, going through these processes, the interviews, you're going to be making so much progress for your life. Just going through these interviews is going to help you long term when you're looking at different interview, like job interviews and things like that.
I'd say like on the district level, like either way, like you still have a passion for FFA either way, and just to show that. So like if you're on the losing side, just to take that drive and passion and the time that you would have spent at district office, like you can still impact members within your chapter, grow your chapter, be more involved within your community. Like FFA, you still have a place in FFA and you can still leave that impact. You don't need that title, I guess, as an officer. So just to always keep that in mind and know that in the back of your mind while you're running. Devin, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just echo, win or lose FFA. Before any of us become officers, we're all FFA members. We all have the same passion. The only difference is the people that are elected get a title. Well, you don't need a title to make an impact in your local community. I've seen multiple times where people run for district office and they lose, and then they don't do anything with FFA for the next year, and then they might run for state office next year, and then they wonder, well, why didn't I get state office? Well, my biggest tip or piece of advice would be that, if you lose and you still want to run for office the next year, I would advise you or wish that you keep putting in the effort into FFA if you want that position, because you're not going to get it by giving up on the organization and then coming back a year later and throwing an application in. You need to put the time into FFA year round, win or lose, if you want to be an officer a second time after you lose the first time.
And I encourage you, if you don't happen to make the team the first year, I encourage you to go out and try again. I mean, it's only going to help help yourself and the organization.
And something that I just lost my train of thought. I have no idea what I was gonna say.
That's okay. If you come up with it,
Yeah.
we can go back to it. But with that, if Devin doesn't have anything else on this, we can go to questions.
So I know Holly asked, what was the most challenging part of becoming a state officer? So I guess if you want to start, Kabe.
The most challenging part of becoming a state officer. That question's interesting because there's many different things that you're going to do to prepare yourself for this process. I think one of the most challenging parts for me was asking people for help. Sometimes I don't really like to ask people for help. I want to try and just kind of do it on my own. But asking people for help, like helping you interview, watch your speech, doing things along those lines is what's going to help you the most. So I guess that's kind of where I struggled maybe.
I guess what came to my mind beforehand was I was just going to say, if you're thinking about running for state office and you're never a district officer, don't let that hold you back, because within our team, there is 5 that were never district officers before. So don't let that hold you back. If you're passionate about it, you want to leave an impact on members, and you have a good understanding of the FFA, like that's not something to hold back and be like, oh, I'm not qualified, because you most definitely are.
Definitely.
What I would say was the most challenging part of becoming a state officer, I guess our year was a lot different. Like COVID hit, district convention, our interview processes were virtual. It wasn't the same. So I guess like within that time of the pandemic and getting shut down, like just making sure that I was running for the right reason, and to make sure that I had thought through everything, and like, oh, if I win, if I lose, like just making sure my right reason was there, and that I want to impact members, and just to not lose that passion within the year, and make sure that I could live out my year of service the best way possible.
Yeah, so answering that question, and then also kind of going into Elena's question. So my biggest piece of advice, or what was the hardest for me, is overcoming the nerves the first time. I know it can be very nerve-wracking, the drive to interviews, but I would say that once you get there, just make yourself comfortable and enjoy it and have fun with it, and you will perform a lot better, and it'll be a lot more memorable experience. And I see we have some more questions pop up here. So for Carson and Morgan's question, the biggest thing I would say is that there's no right or wrong way to do things. For those of you that don't know, you can apply for a district office your sophomore and your junior year in high school, and those are the only 2 years that you can apply. I know Mia and I know we're district officers both times, which you can do. You can be a district officer twice. But a lot of people choose to wait and not apply till their junior year and only be an officer one time. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that either. As far as being on NomCom before running for office, I would say that that's a good idea if you have time. However, if you only have 1 year left to run for office, I wouldn't waste your time trying to get on NomCom. I would just run for office if that's truly what you want to do. Don't get me wrong, NomCom is a good time. It's a good experience. But being an officer is a lot more rewarding opportunity.
To kind of go off of that, so I have a different perspective. I didn't run for district office my first year. Is it something that I regret? I kind of wish I would have. But at the same time, it makes me still have that passion and drive to go as I continue to serve as a state officer. So there's definitely advantages and disadvantages either way you go. It's just kind of how much you want to serve and what your passion is.
And I know I've served on teams with a lot of people that ran just their second year. They didn't even run their first year because FFA hadn't impacted them. They had a changing, a change in heart. They had a story that really impacted them that they wanted to run for district office. So it's just basically all up to you. If you feel like this is something you want to do, you want to pursue with your sophomore year, then run. It's either way. If you win, you lose, you get balloted, you don't. It's a good process to go through.
Well, we'll go ahead and kind of slow some things down here. We want to thank you guys for getting on here. It was a fun night. Like we said, if you guys have any other questions, feel free take a picture of our contact information there. We'll usually pick up or usually on our
Leave us a
phones sometime.
message.
Yeah.
We'll get you back.